Today we're going to talk about how to declutter your home slowly and easily without any stress. Let's get started. When you think about decluttering, it may seem overwhelming. You have all this stuff, you have no idea how you've acquired such an absurd amount of things. All you know is that you need less stuff and you need to declutter, and you don't have to do it all at once. There's the KonMari method that got super popular and even made its way into Netflix, and her method is great. It gets it all knocked out at once, but that can be overwhelming in itself. Especially if you end up dragging all your clothes out and you get ready to start and you run out of time, and then you have clothes lying all over the house and it's actually worse than it was when you started. Now you have even more clutter. And a lot of methods recommend doing it all at once, and if that works for you, great, but I feel like it might not work for you because you're watching this video right now. Only you know you, and I know how I am, and I'm not the declutter an entire house in a weekend kind of guy. So while methods like the KonMari method are useful for a lot of people and it shows you some cool ways to fold your clothes, it's not for everybody. I do like our Netflix show though. The Netflix show is pretty cool. I like seeing people's lives get free and clear of clutter regardless of how it happens. But if someone's coming to your house for a show, obviously you're gonna get it all knocked out. So if you're not trying to put in 40 hours this weekend decluttering your home, you'll appreciate these slower, simple steps that I'm gonna share. If we haven't met yet, my name is Kalen. I'm the founder of Freedom Sprout, where we talk about raising intentional children and living intentional lives. If that interests you, please hit the subscribe button below. First, we need to address why we keep things. So before we get into the how, let's go over the why and the what of decluttering. So I've read plenty of books on minimalism, I've read a lot of blogs about minimalism, and I've really narrowed it down to three main reasons why we tend to keep things. Number one, we overpaid for something. We don't want to get rid of it because we paid so much for it. We don't want to sell it because that takes a lot of time and that's stressful on its own. But holding on to these items that we overpaid for or that we just spent a lot of money on really keeps us focused on how much we spent on that item instead of our true goal, which is decluttering and living a life with less stuff. Regardless of how much you spent on it, if you don't use it, give it a new home. Maybe someone else actually will use it. Number two, we're afraid we'll need it later. This is the just in case mentality. So we're afraid we'll need it later, but we almost never do. We've given away so many things that we had to fight ourselves with because we thought we may need this later, but I would say less than 1% of the time did we actually need the thing that we gave away. So it's worth it for the 99% of the time. And if we did really need something that we gave away, we were able to find it for cheap or borrow it from someone else, so it really wasn't a big deal at all. Number three, and probably the biggest one, is that we've attached sentimental value to the thing, to the item. This is the hardest one, but it's also the most important one when it comes to decluttering and separating ourselves from that materialism. It's important that we don't tie up our feelings into objects. If we have a feeling about a certain object or it brings back a certain memory, that memory is not trapped inside that item. You can get rid of that item and you still have that memory. So if an item makes you happy or sparks joy, as KonMari would say, keep it. But if it doesn't and you're just holding on to it for sentimental purposes and it's not bringing any sort of joy into your life, get rid of it. If it's really a big deal, take a picture of it. Now let's move on to the how. If you're in a chaotic time of life right now, which a lot of us are, we have kids in school and they go to sports and we have work and we have everything else going on and friends and family, it's not the time to dedicate 2 hours a day to decluttering, but you may be able to dedicate 2 hours a weekend or 10 minutes a day. So do what you can. You don't have to tackle the most difficult area first. Anything is better than nothing, so if you've been doing nothing, just start doing something and it's going to be better than where you were. We've been there. So if you can only declutter one cabinet a day or one drawer a day or a quarter of a room a day, just start with that. Think back 6 months ago or a year ago if you would have started this. You started by cleaning a small part of a room, you do one cabinet, you do one closet, you do one small thing a day. Where would your home be now if you had started that 6 months or a year ago? I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty, I'm saying that to give you motivation so that you know where you could be in 6 months or a year from now. Go at your own pace, yes, but take action. Your own pace must still be a pace, and 1 room per decade is probably a little too slow. You're likely here because you want to reap the benefits of a more minimalist lifestyle, and let that motivate you into action. Sometimes the most important thing to do to be productive if you aren't feeling productive, and this is gonna sound weird, but it's to just Be productive, whether you want to or not. Start doing something, and it'll actually motivate you to do more. If you get in the garage or go into the living room and start doing stuff, it'll motivate you to do more whenever you see your progress. It doesn't always come right away, but the motivation will follow the action. And of course, the good news is, if the motivation doesn't follow and you don't start building the motivation, just do your 10 minutes a day, your one cabinet, your one drawer, and be done with it for the day. Maybe that's just not going to be a motivation day.
It's a problem of motivation, all right?
Decluttering usually takes a lot of action, and that can be condensed into a weekend or a day, or that can be spread out into small chunks over time. But decluttering shouldn't lead to stress, because the main point of decluttering is to reduce your stress. So take action, but if you're starting to get stressed out, maybe take a little less action, and then it'll build up momentum over time. Or you could always just use that stress as motivation to clean the entire house. It's up to you. That doesn't work for me. When you start to take action and you start to get that motivation, ride the wave. This is actually a real thing, a motivation wave. So if you set parameters on your goals, like 10 minutes a day or one thing a day, that's great, but don't let that get in the way of your motivation when it's there. You may have that goal to clean out one cabinet on a Saturday morning, but you wake up feeling super motivated and you end up cleaning your entire kitchen. That's great. Do it. That's called a motivation wave. Motivation breeds motivation, and we don't always know when motivation's gonna come. While action does lead to motivation, sometimes motivation just hits us randomly. Don't waste those times, use them. Dr. B.J. Fogg introduced the idea of motivation waves and probably coined the term in his Tiny Habits method. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Fogg's work, I'll put a link to his Tiny Habits book below, and a link to an article I wrote on implementing these tiny habits with kids. I reached out to Dr. Fogg whenever I wrote the article, so it's all his ideas, but just molded to fit kids. I'm sure you've experienced motivation waves before. You probably know what I'm talking about whenever you got that random idea to clean out a closet or something like that. So do your small tasks every day, so you're getting a little bit knocked out every day regardless. But when those motivation waves hit, use them to your full advantage and get as much done as possible. And finally, don't forget to donate or sell as you go. It's up to you whether you decide to donate things or sell things, or to split them up and donate some and sell others. We've really leaned more towards donating things just because it's so much easier. You don't have to worry about anything coming back and the item being broken or electronics not working or anything, and them coming back to you saying, hey, where's my 50 bucks? Whatever. We prefer to donate things. Regardless of how you do it, make sure you're doing it as you go. You don't want to build up an entire garage full of donations that's another stressor on its own. You'll end up with another project. Figure out where you're going to take your donations to for the things that you do decide to donate. Set a routine, find a certain day of the week that you take donations to your donation spot, and just stick with that every week, donating a few things. Decluttering is not about finding the perfect method. If you want to find a certain method for decluttering, there are plenty of them. Go ahead and KonMari your entire house if that's what works for you. But if that's not practical, find your own way. You can use the tips and the steps that I mentioned to do it slowly, and you will end up with a decluttered house. So my point behind this entire video wasn't really to give you a specific method, it was more to give you permission that you didn't really need from me to do it your own way and to just take small steps. Sometimes we worry so much about getting it done and all the stuff we have to do that we end up doing absolutely nothing. So don't feel guilty for spending 10 minutes a day or just a few minutes a day decluttering. Over time, it's going to make a huge difference, and it's better than doing absolutely nothing. Before you go, please hit the subscribe button below to get more videos on money, minimalism, and our travel journey around the world. Check out my new book, Intentional Children. I'll put a link to that below. There's an entire chapter on decluttering and minimalism with kids. That's all for today. I'll see you next week.